technologies, stereotypes, and professions. And for this, we welcome our 5 fantastic panelists. Can you please come to the stage? They will be talking with us. We will have an open discussion on this discipline. Thank you so much for coming. Hello, ladies. While we are here together, I invite you to close your eyes. Close your eyes, don't cheat. You too. Please, close your eyes for a few seconds. Imagine what happens if I tell you a scientific computer. Imagine a scientific computer for a few seconds. Without opening your eyes, imagine what happens when I tell you material engineering. What happens when I tell you IT engineering? What did you imagine? Now open your eyes. And we could say that scientific computer can be imagined as to where our imagination takes us. That place where there are many machines, many monitors in a dark room. When we speak of engineering, we will meet a man who has this nerd style, very tidy, always with technology devices behind him. Or much worse, when we speak of IT engineering, we could think of cables, many cables, entangled cables, the terror of technology. What shall we do? Where shall we put cables? Now, what if I tell you that actually, when we speak of scientific computers, we will speak about real, concrete women who are currently working and who have been developing for decades products, research projects. They have been dealing with the field of knowledge, like Adriana, who has been one of the first scientific computers, or in IT engineering or material engineering, we could speak about Long Lab girls who are creating groups to do joint research on innovative solutions for a better future. That's what STEAM is. It's innovation within the field of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. It's a term that was coined in the 90s to talk about how within this fantastic new future century back then, which was the 21st century, how a new methodology was coming that comprised different disciplines. In the 21st century, art is incorporated as a fundamental part. It is in innovation that we will find, through creation, answers to the upcoming challenges. Currently, when we talk about studying within any of these disciplines like science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, we'll find classrooms full of guys. Every 20 students, only 2 are women. So here and now, we will be talking with professionals who have been working in this field for a long time, who are seeking to expand this outlook so that once and for all, we can say here, knowledge has no gender. Here you can grow wherever you want, regardless of your self-perception. Welcome again, Gabriela, Cicalese, Valeria, Edelsztein, Mara, Dalponte, Ayastuy, Paula, Coto. Well, she will be connected from a distant location because she had a cold. Ana Laura Sosa and Marisa Conde. Let me introduce them and let's open the discussion afterwards. Their resumes are really extensive. Gabriela Cicalese has a PhD in communication from the La Plata University. She has done postdoc work in communication on incidents. She's an undergraduate and graduate teacher in semiotics in different Argentine universities. She's part of the transdisciplinary postgraduate art, science, disassembly, performance, bodies, genders from the Córdoba University, and she was member of the chairship UNESCO Complex Thinking. So at UNSAM University in the communications program, where she does extracurricular activities focused on communicational productions that are gender-based. Gabriela will open the discussion. The big question to her and to all the rest of these women is, what motivated you to start in this field? What were your achievements to become part of this smaller group that works within STEAM? Gabi. Thank you for the invitation. It is a great honor to have met these great ladies. Given the first question that you asked, Juli, as to what motivated us to delve into technology, the first thing that came to my mind was back in 1988, many of you hadn't been born yet. For gamers, Carmen Sandiego was a little girl studying geography. She was traveling in different locations. I used to work at an accounting firm, and they used to bring Texas Instruments with and they sat down all the assistant accountants, all guys, particularly the office runner, because they wanted the office runner to manage the software in his free time, and he was going to do data entry work. And I remember that the firm leader, the accountant, he told me, Gabi, if you don't have anything to do, since these people are coming, why don't you sit down and listen? Okay, I said. I sat down and I was quite curious and I asked questions. And the trainer, who was also a man, said, okay, you go ahead and try as well. So I ended up being the data entry person for that place instead of the office runner, who was not interested at all. Why am I telling you such an old story? Because those of us who are working on gender work, it is more philosophical in nature. We speak a lot about the sticky floor or the crystal ceiling. Women, when we want to grow, and once we are within the industry, as is the case of my panel colleagues here, when we have children, we quit. So we find this crystal ceiling and also a sticky floor because it's harder for us, and it's hard for us to get into the business. So my colleagues from the campus where I'm the academic development director, which I have been doing since 2016, they have illustrated this idea with this picture that I wanted to share with you. My message is, let's not forget that we can discuss everything so long as we are within. That entry is the first thing that we need to create. Then a decade later, in the year 2000, I used to work at a communications center. I wanted to launch the first distance learning program with a virtual platform, which is quite common now for us with the pandemic. This institution had been doing distance learning for a long time, but a platform had to be developed. Moodle did not exist back then. Now we have Blackboard, a new platform. We have a lot of technology available now, but back then booklets used to be mailed to the students. We were trained, were women. And so in a decade's time, from 1987 to this new story, we can see that women have been more included. Well, no, that's not the case. Division of work was something present back then, and the building of archetypes and stereotypes. Archetype is a model to be followed, a role model, the archetypical family, the one that we aspire to. Today, the genders of the characters have changed, like Little House in the Prairie roles. And the same goes for professions. So as you can see here in these pedestals or in these stands, what are the jobs from which we live? We usually jump in through the window, which is education. And a second story along these lines has to do with when I came across Mass Campus. It was a new technologies institute. In general, video games was not central. There was a lot in connection with post-production. That was back in 2005. And as a result of an agreement with CONICET, which is a national technological committee, there was a female researcher from the University of Rosario, came along with a male programmer and a female future doctoral student. And I joined the team on the organizational side. So I joined Image Campus. That project grew. It was one of the first CONICET projects in the company. There is a CONICET mode, which is in-company researcher. A Mass Campus was the second one in the country to have it, and the first one from an institutional educational institution. So it was quite innovative. But who took away everything, or who got all the reward? The programmer. We were exchanging all the requirements with this or with us. Don't do a panoptical platform. We have this educational program. Finally, like with the office runner, everything was assigned to the man. And another aspect that I would like to share with you, and here my girlfriends became really very creative, and they have added some purple shades in the drawing, meaning that we are leaving from the gray areas. These are collective exits that are built from a technology base. I was the director of a short film show at La Crujía Center, and it was a festival called Youth and the World of Work. It comprised the best practices of the youth in the work environment. I had been an activist in the feminist stream, and I had a project that was called Female Communicators. Since this is going to be translated into English, let me explain what I mean, because we used a masculine word in Spanish, but in the feminine form. It was a neologism. So in 2012, there were about 200 or 215 short films submitted. How many applicants were there? Or how many applied to this award? None. In the second festival in 2016, out of the 351 that were submitted, there were already 40 that applied for this award or for this prize. We feminists always say that the personal is political, but exits are always collective. We need focusing on this topic enables protagonists to gain power. And I will close with this that is more related to video games. We had a panel where Laura and Lujan were involved, as Ale Bruno, a great promoter of the industry. Women in video games. It is an annual core event run by Mass Campus, which brings in the innovations in the industry. And there were people from abroad, new projects, a lot of men presenting projects. So I told Eduardo, the Image Campus director, let's have a space, at least, where we can look for women. And where shall we look them? Or where shall we look for them? Well, I knew some of them, a graduate, a teacher, some other ladies who had been related some way or other. And I remember that the first thing that cropped up is that we had never thought about the fact that what happened to us because we were women. 2 or 3 years later, in another situation, there was a panel with other women from the industry, like Valeria. So talented women from the industry, and these same protagonists complained, we don't want to be in a separate panel anymore. We want to be one more of the top. And in the last panel, they ended up leading discussions or talks. What do I mean by a collective exit? When these spaces are opened up, like the 2012 festival, there is an empty space left. Maybe it's the first time that that issue is discussed, or the visibilization is very poor. But by opening up a space, there is strengthening so that it's the girls themselves that can reflect upon their position and claim for that missing spot. Thank you.
Thank you. In the exercise that we did at the beginning, took it from a TED talk. These are talks that inspire and motivate by Baby Steph, who is an engineer. And that's what she said, close your eyes and imagine an engineer. And very few would imagine Debbie Steph talking to them. And very few of them would imagine Valeria Carolina Edelsztein as a great scientist who is here to share the path that took her to where she is now, with a recent launch that she will talk to us. She's a scientist, chemist, teacher, and popularizer of natural sciences in Argentina. She studied chemistry and earned a graduate degree and a PhD from University of Buenos Aires. She's a researcher affiliated with the National Council for Scientific and Technical Research, also called CONICET. She is the co-founder of Científicas de Acá, an initiative to give visibility to the women who have worked and are working in science and technology in Argentina. Gabi, please tell us what brought you here. Hello. I don't like using the mic. How are you? First of all, thank you for inviting me. I love doing this talk and sharing experiences, but I'm going to do a mini game and then I'm going to talk to you a bit about my story. The idea is the following. There are many people working in research everywhere in the world on science and technology. So I'm going to ask you, how many people do you think are working in science and technology around the world? And out of that percentage, how many of them are women? And you will raise your hand when I name the rank where the correct answer is. I'm going to ask how many women are working in science and technology around the world as a percentage of the total. And if you think it's 0 to 10%, raise your hand now. Oh, you're optimistic. Okay. From 10 to 20%? Oh, you are not that optimistic. 20 to 30? 30 to 40? There's a couple. 40 to 50? Anybody? Over 50, I'm not over 50%. Adriana says there is. I asked with regards to the total around the world, and the right figure is just 29%. This is the part where people who get happy, the people who got it right, but it is terrible. It's less than a third of the total who are women, and we are half of the world. So we have a problem there, as we were just saying, and Gabriela had mentioned. It's very difficult. There's an iron door. We can't go in. What do you think happens in Europe? Let's take Europe as an example and say, okay, let us go the same game, but in Europe. What do you think out of the total of people who work in science and technology research in Europe, what is the percentage of women? 10 to 20? 20 to 30? 30 to 40? 40 to 50? More? Over 50%? Adriana still says that she is optimistic. In Europe, according to the last statistics that UNESCO has carried out a special study that it does every 10 years, the last statistics from 2018 showed that there is 32% of women who are working in science and technology in Europe, which is the average around the world. It's not that far. It makes sense. So now we're going to do the fun part, which is Latin America. What's happening in Latin America? And we go once again, how many women are there working in science and technology in Latin America? From 0 to 10%, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 has gone down on the percentage, 30 to 40, 40 to 50. This is the surprising part. In Latin America, we are about 45 to 40%. Yes, we're more, we're almost paired. In Argentina, we are more than half. In Argentina, out of the total of researchers in science and technology, 51%, depending on the statistics that we take, is women. And we must say then, what are you complaining about? It's a lot of you. You're in. That's when you have to look at it more in detail and see what's going on. And what's going on is what Gabriela was just saying. It's very hard to get to the top positions. There's many of us, but we are not in the highest positions and we're not everywhere. And that is important. We are a lot in humanities and social sciences, in medicine, because healthcare implies looking after other people, but we're not in engineering, we're not in IT, we're not in maths, we're not in physics. And we find a lot of obstacles. And one of those hurdles was also mentioned by Gabriela, which is motherhood, and it's not minor. And I'm going to talk to you now about an anecdote and about why we do what we do with Científicas. I have two children. I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. When I was pregnant with my first son, I was doing my doctorate degree, and I would fall asleep everywhere. If you've ever been pregnant, you know this. You just sit down and you fall asleep. So I had to explain that to my boss at that point. My boss, Elizabeth Harris, I had to tell her I am falling asleep because I am pregnant, not because I'm not interested in the work that I'm carrying out. So I told her, I said that I was pregnant. And Ellie, who already had two children, said, don't worry, I'm going to help you. And at that point, I thought, what does she mean? What's she going to help me with? Why would I need help? And that stuck to my brain. When my son was born a few months later, he had respiratory trouble when he was young. I had to, of course, look after him because care duties are not equally shared. And at some point, I heard two colleagues who were also mothers speaking among themselves. They did not know that I was listening. And one said to the other one, what a shame, this girl had a great future. So this idea that now that my son was born, my future was truncated. I had nothing else to do. And those situations, these two examples I'm giving you, really made a difference to me because they showed me the possibilities that were in front of me. One possibility was to completely ignore all of the systemic hurdles that are not individual. It wasn't just my problem. It was a problem within society. And to say, no, there are women who get very far. If they could do it, you should be able to do it. Do it. And if you don't do it, it's your problem. And you could take that attitude and say, well, I got here, I got to the top. If you didn't, it's because you haven't made enough effort. And that also doesn't take into account that we don't have the same opportunities, that we don't all come from the same place, that it is a collective problem that needs a collective solution. Or I could be like Ellie, because that's when I realized what Ellie had wanted to tell me. Ellie had wanted to say, I was where you are now. I've gone through this, and I'm going to try to support you so that you don't have to go through all the hurdles that I went through. And the work that I committed myself to do and that I do every day, and Científicas de Acá is part of that work, is to make the road smoother for others, like the ones before me did for me. I do not want to be the person who says, do it whichever way you can, you should make an effort and that will be enough. I want to be the person who supports others. Científicas de Acá has that root. It came out as a project to make women visible in the sciences in Argentina, to make sure that everybody knows this is a possible universe. We are 4 women, Juli Elfman, who is an editor, Juliel Cain, who's a biologist, Caro Haddad, who is a programmer, and me. I studied chemistry, and I do lots of other things, didactics of natural sciences, etc. And the idea that the 4 of us had was to tell these stories, and not only the successful cases, because that's also a problem. If we always talk about Marie Curie, I love Marie Curie, but it's always, look how wonderful, she got 2 Nobel prizes. It's incredible. Yes, of course. But for every Marie Curie, how many were left down the path? How many were buried in the story that men told? So not only successful cases are important, all of them are. We want to know everything that these women did, even if they don't have a Nobel Prize, because we don't ask men to have 2 Nobel Prizes to be renowned. So we got together with that idea. This what I was talking to you about the statistics. And when we saw the statistics, we wondered, do people realize what is the participation of women in science and technology? Can they name other women? And the project began with a poll. We did a Twitter poll in social networks. We got a lot of data. We realized that we cannot name Argentine scientists who are women. And what we did is we began to collect some stories that didn't have a lot of information. We went to Wikipedia and these entries were not there. So we went to look for the scientists who were alive or their family members, and we spoke to all of those people, and we were able to reconstruct some of their stories, and we ended up creating this book, Científicas de Acá, who has stories such as the one for Cora Rato, Cecilia Grierson, Cora Rato, Rebecca Gershman, Elisa Bachov, the first engineer, and it's illustrated by 4 women who made it a beautiful object, but it is all open source on the web, so you can download it. And then we said, we wanted to make this work visible and we wanted to generate possible universes. If a girl was to be asked what do they want to be when they grow up, they didn't only think that she wanted to be an architect, a musician, or a footballer. We wanted her to think that she could also be an astrophysicist or a mathematician or an IT expert. And we said, in order to do that, in reality, these people must be real in this universe. We want to tell these stories so that they are known. So we did the version of Científicas de Acá to color, which has the stories of all of these scientists, but in an adapted version for children. I love writing for kids. It's something that I really enjoy. So this was a wonderful project. And it has the same illustrations so they can be colored. And within that process, they can recognize these names, all of this work and all of these faces, and realize that perhaps if I ever want to study IT, astrophysics, or maths, they will not be on their own. Many women have done it before, many women are doing it now, and we want to support them. We want to be there for them. Thank you very much.
Great, welcome. Welcome this other real woman. We want to have a book, amazing. After Vale, Mara comes. She's going to talk to us about real and concrete facts as well. Mara Dalponte Ayastuy is a graduate of the Computer Analyst Program and the Computer Science Program from Universidad Nacional de La Plata University. During her undergraduate studies, she took part in research teams on geographic systems of the IT Research and Training Lab LIFIA at UNLP. She also participated in software development teams in multiple domains, ranging from the development of vessel tracking systems to the human resource management system used at the Ministry of Planning. She is currently a member of Nawal project since 2009, teaching technology in vulnerable areas. She is currently a professor in programming and computer science at Universidad de Quilmes. She works on gender-related issues and the democratization on open source technologies. She's a researcher of this university with LIFIA at La Plata University. Thank you very much, Mara. Welcome. Thank you, Juli. Thank you for your great introduction. You have introduced me better than my mother. Hello, everyone. The game is over. There's a lot to be played here at this event. I like mathematics. I like to program. I was really lucky. In the 80s, I played Carmen Sandiego. I played Prince of Persia because there was a computer at home and my dad knew how to program. He used punched cards for programming. Do you know what I'm talking about? You are nodding, but I'm sure you don't know what they are. So I was born in a privileged household. That I could living with this. Back then, I didn't even know that the name was programming. I don't know whether you know what programming is. Does anyone not know? Well, so you're all privileged people because in the spaces where I work, in the neighborhoods where I work, that's something that's not known. People don't know what programming is. There's like a twisted version. There's bad press on what we do. So that's why many people, men and women, don't have the initiative or are not encouraged at doing this or earning a living with this. University is already a place for the privileged. We see also this gender gap, which is huge. I've been a teacher at the university for many years, and in a 40 student classroom, I normally have 2 women, 2 girls, and there's never been a non-binary person in my classrooms. I know that in another classrooms there have, but I've never come across a non-binary person, which is quite remarkable for statistical purposes. I believe I am a privileged person because I was able to study a program which is very male-oriented. I was the only woman in many of the subjects that I studied. I started with several women, but then as I graduated, I was the only woman left. And at some point, I found myself dressed like a man. Probably it must have been a survival strategy. All of a sudden, I had a haircut and I tried to pass unnoticed, not to speak of raising the hand or asking question. Men capitalize words, always. That's on the one hand. It was something that bothered me. And I used to wonder, why are there so few of us? I always asked myself that question. I had the fortune of finding Nawal project, whom a friend of mine took me to. This is a space to formalize this work. It's great that universities have this program. We try to bring technology closer to lower income areas, not just for them to learn how to use a computer. Conectar Igualdad, the first cohort that received a computer, but also for people to think themselves as technology producers. For that, we needed to explain to them what software and hardware are and what programming is. What is that all about? So we started to think about what we could do in those lower income areas in connection with technology. Because besides, we understand what the job market is, we understand what technological development is, and we said to ourselves, there is a lot of work out there and there are a lot of unemployed people. How can we match these two things? And we had the privilege of going to university, so we need to take over and do something about it. So we said to ourselves, what does the job market need? And what background do these people bring? What do they know? What do they have? So we thought about training tools. We developed short workshops in connection with technological development, which is not always programming, because the people in the industry know that there are lots of jobs related to this. As Gabriela has already mentioned, there's lots of tasks related to technological development. Art, there's being able to talk to people with human beings and understanding what they need, have a good interface, which is normally done by women. Another task that is related to this role segregation that's arbitrary. So on the one hand, there's the gender concern with the social and economic emergency. So how can we make girls understand themselves as having the right to be in the technological field? Basically transforming their reality, giving them a space in the technology job market. How can we do that? As Vale mentioned it, reference. The fact that reference should be real, approachable people, because girls from the neighborhoods look at me, they see me and I tell them, I'm a programmer and I love it. And I really become very intense and we can do a game. And they tell me, but you are you. You have light colored eyes. You had a family, a mom and a dad that gave you a computer when you were a kid, because I tell them my story. Many of these girls, they have the notebooks from Conectar Igualdad and from Juana Manso laptop programs, but we need a twist to this. We need for some of these girls to reach the place they deserve, that we all people deserve. So what can the job market do in connection with technology, articulated with university or other training centers. It shouldn't necessarily be a formal entity. What can we do to give them a real opportunity to these people, to these girls, so that they can get their first technology job and that they can sustain it? Because we have some experiences of girls who have got a job, girls who would never have thought that they could join a company and who were expelled, not because they were fired or not because someone in particular were bad at them, but they didn't feel they were represented there. They always felt outsiders from that world. They always felt that they were in an inequality position. So we should think about a realistic inclusion model. So they should join the job market, but also be able to remain there. So I encourage you all to engage in a discussion in a moment for you to say what you have, what your thoughts are in connection with this, because this is nice when there is interaction. You could, for example, say, I don't agree with this, and I believe that this will be useful to all of us. Knowing other cases and other scenarios will be useful for us, because I took this question to my colleagues, women programmers who are working in the industry, some of them who were students of mine, and I asked them, hey, when you were a kid, what did you think that you were going to study? Why did you choose this program? Did you know any woman who had done this before? Did you undergo violence, any type of violence when you were doing this degree program or at work? From all those experiences that I gathered, well, maybe at the statistical level, there are not too many. Maybe my sample is small, but in all these cases, I believe that these are privileged situations. All these people, with university peers or not, they were always motivated since they were young, or they had access to a computer, or they had a teacher in high school who motivated them. Someone who told them, you're great at maths, but don't study math. Why don't you do this other degree program at this university? So I'd like to know whether there are cases of women, not on the programming side, but who have reached a technological development position with a different origin, an origin without all these privileges that I have mentioned. Audiovisual consumption, for example. What series were watched in the 90s or in the 80s? In what series did we see a woman or a female programmer? I can think of only one film. I think it was one that was called The Network. So there aren't many programmers, much less women. So we are very limited to say, I want to be there. So I encourage you to exchange ideas or to interrupt one of my colleagues in a moment, whenever you want.
Thank you so much. In fact, we are going to have a moment for a Q&A later to do an exchange, because that's what really enriches us. And that's what Sheroes in Games is about. We are now using this video for the future generations and women of the present who may say, well, I would like to work on this. I've always loved science. I've always loved mathematics, or just using the computer, tearing it apart so as to make it up again. And speaking of different fields within STEAM, we're going to listen now to Ana Laura Sosa Antia, who is a translator, sworn translator from UMSA. She did postgraduate degree in cultural innovation in UCA. And it's been 10 years since she's been leading technical innovation projects. In the present, she's part of game in Globant, where she works as a project manager in eSports project. She's participated in initiatives that promote inclusion of women and girls in the industry of gaming. Welcome, Ana Laura. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your invitation. I also would like to thank the organizers and my manager and director that for some reason thought it was a good idea for me to be here speaking about my experience in gaming. Well, I prepared something that I will be changing right now because there were some things that were discussed that I was going to say. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. So I was introduced as a sworn translator, English sworn translator, and what do we do in the STEAM world? You might wonder. Well, I'll tell you a bit about my story. I've always been interested in languages. They've always been easy for me. It wasn't maths that was easy for me. I'm on the other side, actually. Whatever is linguistics and grammar, I've always been good at that. So I chose English translator course. When I was doing the degree program, I was doing fine, but I didn't like law, studying law. So I was thinking, what could I do? And that's how life brought me, and a few years back now, to apply for a company you might know. It starts with an E. It's a very famous IT company, one of the pioneers, actually. And as I was thinking about this talk yesterday, I was thinking, what can I say as a sworn translator, an English translator actually, here after hearing about all these wonderful women who have spoken today. I felt like I wasn't supposed to be here really. But I thought, I'm going to do my talk for everyone who's here and everyone who is on streaming too, focusing on what did I do to be here? Because I think that what I've done, anyone can do. And that's how I thought, okay, what motivated me? What path did I go through to become project manager at Globant? I'll tell you a bit more about my experience. I'm in AAA game in a very important sports league that I cannot mention. We have signed an NDA, so I cannot tell you more about it, but it's a very important game here in Argentina. We are about 50 people working in the game development. About 50, actually. We're 2 people short of 50, but there are only 5 women in almost 50 people. 1 in the team leading part, which is me, and then we have 3 developers and 1 more woman. I think it's quite short, only 5 in 50 people. So I started thinking, why are there no women in this field or in these higher positions too? And Gabby was talking about the glass ceiling. So I started thinking, why am I here? How did I break the glass ceiling? Because I do think that I broke the glass ceiling. And once you break it, it becomes easier. We can all agree on that. You can vote, you have a voice, but how do you break it in the first place? So I was thinking from my own experience, what did I do? And I was also thinking about my current position in Globant as a manager. What blockers, what obstacles do people who want to be part of face to be in the game? What does it take? So I was thinking about my experience on the one hand and about the obstacles I see on the other hand. So what did I do to be here? And something came up, and it's not minor, which is related to the access to languages. What allowed me to break the glass ceiling was speaking English, which might seem implausible, but you have to be a designer or a developer. But what made me break the glass ceiling was speaking English. Once I entered this company that I cannot mention, or I don't know if I can, but just in case I won't. So once I was in this company, I loved what I was doing. I was working in the process, then in different projects, and I said, I want to stay in this industry, the IT industry. I find it fun. But what happens when you get a project like the one I have now, where you get new positions? We make the team bigger, or someone quits, or someone moves upwards, so someone else has to take their position. And the main obstacle we have when we want to hire people is language. It's still language. And in this talk where we are talking about gender and the obstacles and what makes people break the glass ceiling and be here, which by the way, I love what I do. I would choose it 1,000 times more. I love leading teams. I do not feel lonely. I love what we do. It's fun. I'm working in gaming. I'm privileged. Many would like to be where I am right now. And I know that because lots of people contact me to ask me different kinds of things. You do have my name there. So if you want to look me up later and ask some questions, I'm available. But I think we have to take this into account. We cannot leave this element out, which is language. I won't make up any figures, but I'm sure that more than 90%, I would say, 90% of gaming clients, those who make games and AAA games even more, they are English native speakers. So when I want to get some staff for my project, I need to think about the language. Worst case scenario, you get 2 or 3 applicants who are obviously male, few women. In the time I've been working on gaming, I think I've run into these women that I'm working with right now, and previously just 1 or 2 more. And it's happened that in some technologies, there's no one, no men nor women. Sometimes we get applicants who are great. We're so happy because we got our staff. And then when we do the English test, they fail. And we cannot ignore this. The gaming industry speaks English. You can ask anyone who works with me. We are speaking English all the time, Slack, email, calls, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever we use is in English. Communication is constantly in English. Documentation on how to access the games is in English. So that's one of the main obstacles. Of course, there are other obstacles, but I'm speaking from my point of view, my perspective as a manager, and the challenges that I've run into. I think it's possible to surpass these challenges. There are other things to solve as well, I know, but I thought it was interesting to mention this point of view. A few weeks ago, we got together to get to know each other and to think about what we would be speaking of today. And I thought it was so enriching to see these different points of views, because we all see reality from our own point of view, and we see a little part of reality from education, from science, from the projects themselves. I speak from my position of a company that makes games and what are our obstacles. And I think this should be taken into account. This is one of the biggest obstacles, English. And so we have to take it into account so that everyone can break their glass ceiling. But this is beyond gender issues. For me, speaking English was necessary. I couldn't believe applicants didn't speak English. I'm translator and I manage a gaming team. I think language was a key. I like to call it the magical key. Once inside, I specialized in different methodologies, Scrum, PMI, PO, coaching, and many other things I did throughout my experience in these projects. But I was already in, and once you're in, it's different. Now I would like to leave you with a question to discuss later. What do we have to do so that more people can break the glass ceiling and they can be here? I can assure you that the gaming world is so cool, so fun. We do great things, and you're all invited to see the different options we have in gaming, not only in Globant. Of course, you are all invited to Globant. You can contact me. We are looking for people all the time. But I wanted to leave you with that question for us to think together on how we can make more people and more women especially break the glass ceiling.
Thank you so much, Ana Laura. Finally, to close this first round of introductions and presentations from our great panelists, let's welcome Marisa Conde, who's an IT technique professor for computer. She has a master's degree in video games and education and expert in educational technology. She comes from the pedagogic side related to technology. She's also a teacher in different national universities and from Spain. She's a referent from the Enfoco program. She's a CEO of GENIATEKA and a volunteer at Argentina Cyber Segura. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for the invitation, and I'm grateful for having listened to these talented speakers. Let me tell you how I started. First, I was a mother. I had my children first, who are now 40 and 35 years old. Then I started the IT training program, and I met someone who was a pioneer, Dr. Graciela Enaola Orase. In 2003, she realized that the industry and education could go hand in hand, of course, mediated by video games. It was thus that I participated in a research team, and we started to do things together because we realized that when a girl thinks and projects themselves, that happens between 7 and 8 years of age. And that's when they start thinking about possible careers. So we have to start early on to encourage these girls so that they can imagine themselves in these degree programs or in these careers that have to do with science and technology. We call this tasting workshops, programming workshops, 3D design workshops, 3D printing and robotic workshops, a number of sciences that are related to each other. They are part of STEAM with the work methodology. If we want different people, we need to educate them differently. Working in silos rather than project-based, having a more collaborative mind, and the absence of that collaborative mind creates this bias and the fact that the women cannot join these sciences and this industry. So much so that several women got together. So birds of a feather flock together. So with this same outlook, with this same background and training, we encompass from elementary level to higher level, and we set up a team called GENIATEKA, like the Library of Genius would be the translation. We conduct tasting workshops where we work with everything that I have just mentioned in different environments. Because girls who have access naturally, it's because they have some sort of incentive at home. But what about those who are not incentivized at home? My colleagues have discussed the different contexts where they are not encouraged. They are told, this is not for you. That's many times the main hurdle. Not picturing themselves as being able to do it. So As you can see in the pictures, we work in different areas. We have even done that here at C3. We provide girls with this possibility, also boys, but we focus on girls to be able to encourage them. And in this need for there being women in the sciences, I like to speak about airbags. You know, when airbags were created, I encourage you to Google when airbags were invented. You know, that device that cars have. Would anyone be so kind as to look that up? You know, the airbags in automobiles, it's a sort of protection against that are used in car accidents, 1952. Do you know when the development of mannequin with a female body was devised? In 1995. An airbag with a woman's, the airbag had been conceived with the male body in mind, which hurts women more than protects them. Many years went by until those dummies were devised. So as you can see, it is very important to have a female look in science and technology. Even pregnant dummies had to be taken into account for airbag development. This has marked me individually. I joined the video game world because of my children. And I worked in programming and I worked in imaginary worlds, thinking of these games to improve context to imagine a better future. What you can see now represent in-person workshops, but what happened during the pandemic? Lots of things happened. Here, we started to conduct synchronic online programming workshops and also 3D design workshops with girls. We invited girls through enrollment forms. It wasn't just GENIATEKA, but we also resorted to other women who have labs, Fab Labs, other type of communities. We incorporated them not to compete, but for them to provide these spaces as well. We did this twice on February the 11th, which is the Day of Women and Girls in Science and Technology. It was quite a success because we did for girls as from 5 years of age all the way up to teenagers. There was an enrollment form. We asked for families to support them and to participate. So workshops with different themes were held. So they had to enroll, as a link was sent to them, and this was free of charge, which is something that called people's attention. They were surprised at these crazy ladies organizing all these things for free. There are many teachers here, and we have changed the chip in the teacher's mind. What you can see there has to do with practice communities, teachers from different countries, as you can see there, share their knowledge, share the cultural heritage. The best thing you can do is to share and grow in knowledge. And as regards some solutions that we were asked to think about in connection with what we were doing, I'm a teacher at the José C. Paz University. And as you can see, the number of women enrolling the video game program is increasing. José C. Paz is a low-income area. 99% is first generation of students, not just women, but people going to university. So it is significant in this context for women to be willing to study, because women don't feel they have the right to do other things. The only thing they believe is that they need to stay at home, cook, and take care of their families. So what actions are necessary? Public policies that will support training, soft loans for acquisition and replacement of technology. I'm not saying that technology should be given away, but at least access should be given to this possibility, as well as support for mothers, so that mothers can also become professionals. So as Valeria was saying, she had someone who helped her out. So let's develop a policy, because it's not just the baby. Daycare centers are important, but once the baby is grown up, what will you do with that child? Think of day centers, daycare centers, so that women can leave their children while they study to become professionals, because not always do they have a family behind them, or not always do their families are willing to support them. So these are some of the ideas, and I hope that we can continue growing and participating much more in all scientific areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marisa. And you have given me the perfect intro. I think we have a bit more time for a question that I have for the rest of our guests with regards to the fact that we're talking about challenges, we're talking about hurdles, we're talking about the fact that we need more women in the industry so that they come into STEAM. How can we do that? And when we're speaking about building collaborative knowledge, we're talking about the fact that there are so as diverse challenges as context. So we must think of diverse solutions. What do you think we should do? What can we do? I'm going to talk about an artistic anecdote, which I have two children. They are 22 and 20, and they both went to the music conservatoire. The headmistress had a meeting with parents when we were going to take our kids into the conservatoire. And she used to say, do not put in the form what instrument they want to specialize in. Oh, no, but my son wants to do the piano. We know there's not many vacancies for piano. Please don't. Before you put the instrument down, it is mandatory for them to come to a sort of tasting workshop, as Marisa was just saying, for them to have the experience and to speak to the different teachers and to go through all the classrooms. So they would show the kids all of the instruments, such as the harp, oboe, flute, perhaps instruments they had never seen, because the kid wanted to go and study guitar, and they were being sent there because it was free in the case of the city of Buenos Aires, but not much more. And they ended up awakening other vocations by making them do this. And the second anecdote also has to do with something else, with what I spoke about the other day. We all see things from our perspective. I come from the feminist perspective. I come to the industry from that perspective, and I participated in the law for the quota for elected posts, which in the 90s we had. At that point, it had to be 30% of women in elected posts, and that was not greatly accepted in society. It did not come with a wave that claimed for that space. We were very few, and we managed, due to a series of variables, for the law to be passed quickly. The politicians, even women politicians from majority parties, used to say, no, we don't agree we are going to earn our place. Once again, thinking about that this ceiling is for everybody. It is for everybody once you reach there, but how many men had more opportunities than girls to study English when they were little? So the truth is they did not like this law, not even the beneficiaries, the same as the kids who wanted to see, didn't want to see all instruments because they wanted the guitar. But in some sense, to motivate and bend things in order to have legal support for that to exist, such as this positive discrimination law, where they were saying it is mandatory to have a proportion of women in the lists for election. And once this generated the fact that women themselves then were able to walk down the path and see what happens. Because even if it's mandatory in companies to say, okay, you must have so many women, and of course, dissidencies as well, of course, all the non-binary people among the people that you employ. And that generates change by itself. Many women then get together and do things. We continue like this as a tangible step. What we should propose from the outreach program is to do training for women and girls, and for non-binary collectives. Positive discrimination. When we first talked about it, everybody was like, oh, the kids, the boys were saying, oh, I want to do it too, but no, it's not your turn. And that generates stress. It is a first step, because if we do it openly, women and men may come and we may be able to generate that space, but the men will ask more questions, will set the pace. We won't have the same freedoms. Once we thought about doing a digital workshop in one of the shanty towns, Villa 31, and people from Garganta Poderosa said, this is just for women. And some of the people said, why? It's only going to be for women, they said, and it has to be by women trainers. They asked us from that place, from the shantytown, from that center for women. They were saying it for a reason. It was women. They had gone through violence. So they asked for that. And the men in our group were like, oh no, I want to participate. I want to work with girls. But we had to say, no, they need not to be with men. That's it, accept it. We don't have to get that far, but this is an example. And within the non-formal trainings, we can see that we need to enable these spaces. From my work from Globant, I was thinking about what proposals we may have, and there are many. We are a company that thinks about diversity, feminine leadership. And I was thinking about a study that was done not so long ago that went to our program called She Leads. And this is a program, we are 5 women out of 50, and out of those 5, only one is a leadership position. 10% is low. Well, I'm not, maths is not my strong point, but one is in a leadership position. And I was talking about She Leads, this program, which is for 2025, we are thinking that out of the leadership roles, 50% should be women. That is our goal in Globant, but where can I get them? Because I have to train them. So on the one hand, there is something that is internal within the company, which is different stages, one that is for everybody and one that is for the ones that are already leading. And then there's also a proposal that we're working on with regards to recruiting to go and get women and to offer them a space for training to those who are outside the company. If I go outside the company, I have to enable that training. And we are also carrying out a lot of initiatives that have to do with leadership workshops in the community, not only for employees. There is a program that we are about to refloat. It's called Back to the Game, and it is for people who have stopped working due to, most of them, because of the fact they had children, to go and fetch them and get them to come back to jobs, especially if they're leaders. I think that's very interesting because I tie this to the anecdotes that some of my colleagues have stated. That once you leave, you feel you cannot come back. I have to care for my family, and I think it's important to help and support. I want to help them to smooth the way so that they can all come back to the game. So I believe as a company, we can do something from within. We're also trying to aid the community so that everybody can take part. Me once again. This is the moment where you turn to utopia and you say, it'd be wonderful for the world to be different than it is, but it's not. You have to be a bit more practical, pragmatic. I think there's three important things. One is, of course, participation by citizens. One that has to do with teaching, which I think is something that is very, very motivating to me, and it has a great impact. Teaching, beyond its intrinsic value, is able to multiply values throughout classrooms. And then there is communication, which is something that I can speak of from my experience. I don't want to speak just from a utopic point of view. The utopic part is saying, what do we need? We need public policies. Of course, we need public policies that contemplate the existence of places to take care of children. We need public policies that contemplate equality of free days when you're working. We need public policies that are practicable and serious. Can I make that happen? It is difficult. I can do it from as a citizen thinking about who to vote for, but I cannot do much more in that regards. I think we all know that we need those public policies. They should exist, and it is important for them to exist, but in practice, there's not much we can do about it. And I think that is a hurdle that is beyond our remit. I would love for that to be different, but I can't do anything to solve it right now. So I think of the teaching. From the teaching point of view, yes, I can think there's a lot we can do. We can rethink the stereotypes that we perpetuate ourselves. That is an exercise that is interesting in itself. When you begin to think about it, you think that you reproduce a lot of times, a lot of stereotypes without realizing. Sometimes they say, how about in chemistry? How can you talk the atom story with a gender perspective? No, that's where it is. Why? Because sometimes they use examples. For example, in chemistry, when you want to explain what is the relation between products to have a chemical reaction between reactives, and you say, okay, they so much of a quantity reacts with the other. And a typical example is to talk about a dance couple. Let us imagine that you've got 10 women and 12 men. How many couples to dance can you do it? It is a typical example, because what is the expected answer? The expected answer is 10 couples. So you've got 2 more boys, and that's why you have a limiting reactive. It is an example that we use a lot. But if you have 22 people, you can do 11 couples, because a couple is 2 of something. So that is reproducing a stereotype in classrooms. And what happens many a time is that the students themselves say, hey, That's not right. So I think on the one hand, there is this rethinking of what we repeat and to listen, because sometimes it feels like we have all the answers and we don't at all. So we should give room to ourselves to listen to people who have other perspectives. And when it comes to communication, this has a lot to do with visibilization. When you can show these possible universes, these are women who dedicate themselves to working in IT, maths, engineering. They exist, they are there. We have public universities and we can argue, I would love to, we can argue the access, of course, is not the same for everybody. Not because we have free universities, everybody can attend, because that is false. We know that that is false. Many times we would like to believe that that is not so. Everybody has access, but the truth is not everybody does. But we should recognize that these places exist, that there is public free education, that there are places where there is support. So teaching, once again, is a space where we can really work to achieve these solutions. And visibilization is also very important to at least show that these women exist, that they're there, and that we have always built scientific knowledge, because it is different to say that women are now interested in these subjects than saying that women have always been there, but we were sometimes hidden behind husbands, parents, fathers, brothers, cousins. We have been there. We are here and we always want to be here. That needs to be told. That's why we need to tell these stories so everybody knows them. We need for this to be spoken about, for these to be names that are well known and stories that are well known and faces that are well known, so that other girls can identify with those. Okay, something that happens, speaking about teaching and in classrooms, is as a teacher, I've always heard girls saying, no, 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 the technology is not for me. And the limiting factor is within their own heads. I always say, why can't you do it? If you say you can't do it, you won't be able to do it. And another thing that when you talk about access that Valeria was speaking about, when it comes to public universities, we went with a team of teachers from the University de 3 de Febrero to do an experience with kids and teachers at the University of Luján. And they divided themselves into 3 groups. I worked with kids. A psychologist who is in our team worked with gaming addiction. And another one worked with teachers with regards to commercial video games to see how they could be connected to the curriculum. And once we carried out each of the workshops, we all met and we got feedback. The kids who had worked with me would show the parents, these were kids between 8 and 11 years of age. They would show them what they had done in 2 hours programming. We had worked with Scratch. They had worked designing characters, modifying them, and programming with their own gaming proposals. One of the fathers asked to talk, and then they said that up until then, he was a collector of recycling. He had never thought that one of his kids could even set foot on a university. And from there, his perspective had changed. He realized his kids had the right to go to a university. We all ended up crying. I find it very emotional because a lot of it has to do with that. Not to think that we have the right to do it, but we do have the right to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marisa. Each and every voice that have been here now represent that the goal of this talk is to be, once again, a space for motivation, for encouragement, for saying, women, here we are. We've been here for a long time. Forever, we've been developing, and we are waiting for you. We do need this extended view. When we talk about building knowledge collaboratively, we hope that this becomes richer with multiple outlooks. We have been working on this project, Sheroes in Games, which we will present shortly. Before anything else, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here, for sharing your stories, and also for still being there, motivating, opening up doors, so that this gap becomes more and more invisible, so that it is one more anecdote for our future generations, as immediate as possible, so that this is in the past, like when we say, did you know that in the past women couldn't vote? Today, it's almost, because we need to see where, it's almost an anecdote. So we are going to start part of the story that we are building and part of the story that provides us with support to continue building, to continue looking forward, because it is from this place that the true solutions for the challenges of humanity are built, which we will be facing together. Thank you very much for this panel, girls, and welcome. Sheroes in Games. We have a few minutes for Q&A. Would anyone like to ask a question? Please raise your hand. Have you ever felt that you were inferior or invisible because of someone else's attitude or because of a widespread attitude at work or within the industry as a whole? I work at an institution whose 85% of faculty is men, and I coordinate it in terms of content. And the contents need to be developed with me because I'm the one doing the curriculum. Many times they tell me, let me explain this to you. Many times they interrupt me and they tell me, let me explain this to you. So I stop them and I tell them, let me explain this to you. So this doesn't happen naturally and I have to impose myself. And regarding the division of work, maybe now, if someone tells you, go and wash the dishes, as is normally the phrase spoken here to women, there is a great division of work that is politically incorrect. You can't say now to someone, you are good for being a teacher. Like in kindergarten, where there is a corner for cooking and the mechanical corner for boys. And this is still the case in public and private kindergartens. But there are small divisions of work. Like when there are several of us at a meeting, and it doesn't matter if we have a higher rank, we are the ones that end up doing all the administrative work, doing the minutes and setting up the Zoom link. Also, coffee is always women who take care of pouring coffee for everyone. And many times I tell my female colleagues, okay, let him do it. And they look at me with hatred in their eyes. Those daily things, they are not related to big premises, but that happens all the time at all times. If you change the chips in your brains and if you start paying attention to that, you will realize that we need to become vigilant of this. Yes, that is the case in many situations. We are the ones taking the minutes, the ones setting up the Zoom link, just for the fact of being women. This is not a personal situation, but I'm bringing this up because there are many colleagues who must have seen this. There are many situations at work, contrary to what you were just saying, where in a company, a training is organized for anyone or for everyone for career growth purposes, but the email is not sent to women. The email is sent to men. At some Argentine universities, some professors have said they write a syllabus and they say this is deterministic, this is how it's going to work. It's not that it works differently depending on the days of the month. So this is a non-gender-based type of approach. And I can't think of any other situation now at college, but at work, we attend meetings where there are 50 men and I'm the only woman. And if you want to take the floor, you feel kind of shy. And once you've said something, a boy will say the same that you have just said a moment ago, and then they quote him and not you. I'd like to share an experience from the other side. I was involved in a project, not the current one, where the leadership roles, both the technical director and the technical lead and the project manager and the delivery manager were all women. It was a project led by women and things were working very well. So it never happened to me in the industry, but I insist. I'm speaking on the gaming industry side. It did happen to me when I was a teacher, younger than now, when I was 23 or 24 years old. And I had a student who told me, I'm an engineer. He was 50 years old, roughly. He told me, you can't teach anything to me. Sorry? He said, I'm an engineer. And I told him, I'm an English translator. Your field of knowledge is different from mine. That's it. So I suffer that type of discrimination because you're young and you're a woman, you can't teach me anything. That happened to me, but not in this industry, much less in the gaming industry. The IT industry is quite woman friendly and gaming is even friendlier. So within the gaming industry, I didn't suffer any type of discrimination, and I'm speaking personally. Valeria, who was the coordinator for the previous panel, she brought up industry data in Argentina, how many women the gaming industry has and how many women occupy leadership position. That's not gender friendly at all. The data shows that the situation is not friendly. It's difficult for that to be recognized. I understand your position. It's only natural, but I wouldn't say that it is a gender-friendly industry, particularly in terms of content definition. When we are working on what to do with a video game, there's always a patriarchal view in the content development. Think about the stereotypes of the heroines. There is a backward look in terms of aesthetics and body image. That is not the case in other areas. So in that sense, I wouldn't state that the industry is so gender friendly. Can I say something? When you are saying that there aren't so many people in leadership positions, but when we want to hire women, we can't find them. They don't apply for the jobs. That's another question mark. When it comes to making decisions, I can bet you who is the one behind decision making. It's interesting here to say that, as I said earlier, there are many challenges and there are many scenarios and they are diverse. And that's the great thing of developing projects like the ones that we are going to be presenting now. But the idea is to bring up these multiple scenarios because each country also has multiple scenarios and there are challenges facing each one of them, operating at different levels. So given those scenarios, it happens that the vision, the search, and the inclusion of women is an important and urgent matter. So I'd like to thank you once again for being here, for participating in this panel. Thank you for bringing up all these questions, for sharing your experiences. Each and every one of you is growing and opening up roads from every node, which is an indication of how important diversity and collaborative spaces are for creating knowledge. Thank you very much. And let's present the project now. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you.